surprise shone light from distant northern skies. At that point, I realized I don't know where it comes from, but I know it's okay. This is all an illusion, and I'm willing to play.
Welcome to the Quantum Guide Show, interviews with awakened masters as they share their quantum work with you. The Quantum Guide Show is produced by Karen Holton, creator of the 9 Steps to Quantum Health Transformation, a free 9-step online course to give you the tips and resources you need to thrive. Karen lost and continues to keep off 178 pounds of surplus body weight as she made her dreams come true. Whether you are awakening to the ascension process or simply want a wiser, more efficient lifestyle, this program is for you. No strings attached. The Quantum Guide Show is brought to you in part by Zendome's Orgonite, Karen's unique brand of orgone generators, ethically sourced, handmade, and double charged for maximum effect. Find out how orgone generators work and what they can do for you. Don't be fooled by imitations. Check out Karen's current selection, only available from her website, KarenHoltonHealthCoach.com, and on Facebook, facebook.com/Quantum Health Transformation. Enjoy the show.
Welcome back to the Quantum Guide Show. Today in episode 69, I would like to introduce you to my new guest, Lachlan Dunn. But before we get started, here's some background information about him. Lachlan describes his journey as a roller coaster of a ride. He grew up in the very chaotic and violent western suburbs of Sydney, Australia. While growing up, his life was highly intense and highly stressful inside and outside of his home. Being a kid that roamed the streets, Lachlan was interacting with a lot of very interesting people, including drug addicts and their kids, broken, violent families, etc., many of which were both Samoans and Tongans who belonged to various gangs. Because Lachlan didn't know how to defend himself, he was generally targeted, especially by his next-door neighbor, who was actually one of his best teachers in retrospect. This motivated him to pursue mixed martial arts and combat sports in his later teens. Lachlan fell deeply in love with this and dedicated himself to becoming the best MMA athlete he could be. This required him to learn and understand all about the shadow, mind, body, and spirit, and the health optimization in bioharmonizing, using tools like float tanks, cold plunges, saunas, grounding mats, breath work, healthy light technology, and more, which he continues to study and explore today. Through Lachlan's exploration into health and integrating all that he has learned, he brought many healing responses back into balance, like his breathing mechanics, sleep apnea, and sleep quality, greatly improved digestive health, cured his sugar addiction, and began deeply healing family relationships and rehabilitating himself psychologically from all of his misperceptions of events. Improving the quality of his health is also what sparked his spiritual awakening, as it liberated so much consciousness for Lachlan to use and move on up to higher levels of consciousness. There was an amplification of his spiritual awakening. Over a 2-year period from 18 to 20 years of age, he explored LSD and cannabis heavily, having some of the most extraordinary mind-expanding and healing experiences as a result. At the moment, Lachlan is a deeply inspired 22 years young holistic health coach, podcaster, and podcast coach creator who's on a mission to revolutionize agriculture and educate people about holistic health and esoteric spirituality in a comprehensive, holistic, and balanced way. Lachlan does this primarily through his 3 podcasts called Transcendent Explorations, Health and Wellness and Shit, and The Heart of the Matrix. And the link to his platform and other social media platforms will be in the description below. Welcome, Lachlan. How are you today?
I'm doing amazing, Karen. Thanks so much for inviting me on the show, for reading that intro. It always takes me back through my journey. Some very interesting things that we can talk about within that. But yeah, thank you immensely for having me on the show.
Oh, my pleasure. And for the viewers, do check out Lachlan's platform, because I actually was on his show, I don't know, maybe about a month ago. Yes. And it's really interesting to find out the behind the scenes activities and life of the different podcasters. And we're kind of all on the same mission to make our lives better and to help other people. And so I'm really excited to have you on the show. So I was wondering if we could start off. What I thought was really intriguing about your bio is that you're like your next door neighbor who really seemed to target you. Mm-hmm. And you said that he ended up being one of your best teachers. So can you explain a little bit about how people, who targeted you in the past or gave you a rough time, how they actually became teachers in the end result?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's really only in the end, in retrospect, in reflection, that you actually see that what they were doing, quote unquote, to you was actually, they were doing it for you. They were benefiting you. But in the moment, we have these polarized perceptions where we think that experiences are only one-sided. Mm-hmm. We completely forget that we live in a two-sided universe, an entangled universe, positive and negative, chaos and order, drawbacks and benefits. These all arise together to make up every single experience we go through. You cannot have a one-sided experience. It's from my perception, it's impossible to have an experience that's purely absolutely negative or purely and absolutely positive. It has to be a combination of the two in an equal balance. And so going through these experiences as just a kid, we don't have this understanding. We're already, I would say at that time, this was around 15, 16 that he really began to target me more intensely. I was simultaneously going through what I would say is the human condition. Maybe you'd call it Wetiko, maybe you'd call it the unconscious, but it was dealing with these questions of why is the world so angry? Why is everybody so aggressive? Why is everybody so selfish? Why is it so hostile? Like, why is everybody so contradicting? Like, why do the adults that I talk to say one thing and then act another way? Why are they programming me with the fact that this is just the way it is? This is just the world. We're just aggressive, barbaric, ape-like beings that are just here to conquer and here to reach the pinnacle, the top, and it's survival of the fittest, and you just do what you're told and you get on with life. And so internally, intuitively, I was having a completely different response. It was, no, this isn't the world. This isn't what you've been taught. Like, we're actually innocent in our nature. We're actually selfless, not selfish. We're all the opposite to what I just mentioned. So at 16, I'm kind of going through this psychosis. I'm absolutely psychologically upset because I cannot get the answers to these deep-seated questions in why the world the way it is, why are people the way they are. And obviously this was amplified through someone like my next door neighbor, who would have been about 6 years older than me. Mm. To give people some context, you've got to realize that this kid is the son of a full-blown drug addict who's grown up in a family who sells like meth and coke and like all ice and like all the hardcore drugs. And so in retrospect, who am I to begin to just blame and point my finger and play the victim? I mean, look at the circumstance in which this kid grew up in. He didn't know any better. If anything, he was just projecting all his insecurities or his anger or his unprocessed contents of consciousness material onto me, being his primary boxing bag that he would use to express all of that. And so I think it's really in retrospect when we learn some of these fundamental concepts that the universe is entirely balanced, that we can see that what people have done to us that seem negative, if we can sit with that experience and then look at it from another view, we would actually see what they did benefited us simultaneously in that exact moment. And so some of the so he was negative in the context in which he would bully me. Like he would just pretend to be my friend, and then like I would go over his house because he was my next door neighbor, and then he'd pull a knife out on me, or he'd just like start going crazy, or take me out to his pit bull dogs in the backyard. It's like that movie stuff, you know, they're chained up and they're like aggressive pit bull dogs. And, you know, I was just absolutely shitting myself as a 15-year-old who's already psychologically upset, doesn't know how to defend themselves. It's really just this innocent kid in such a hostile environment. That all seemed absolutely traumatic. But as I grew up, as I moved out, as I began to live by myself and be alone and actually process all of those experiences, he was actually teaching me to be strong. He was teaching me to be resilient. He was teaching me how to grow up, teaching me to take responsibility. He was the catalyst for me to get into MMA. Like there was already a bunch of contributions of people and stresses. Another big one being my mother. I didn't have a good relationship with my mom at all growing up. So this was another big fuel of energy that was just building up inside of me. And I was just ready to erupt like a volcano. And it was my next door neighbor who was kind of that pin who popped the balloon, you know, who just pushed the trigger and allowed that volcano of energy to find something to channel through, which was mixed martial arts. Because I had to know that every day I come home, he was probably standing up on his shed, looking over into the backyard, waiting for me. As soon as I got home from school, every day I would be looking out his window. He'd be waiting for me. He was like, you know, he was all over me. It was creepy, disgusting, and beneficial and positive all at the same time, as I've mentioned. So yeah, that then got me into MMA, and that's a whole different story. But it's, I think some of these fundamental concepts, and then sitting with that and applying the concepts, like sitting with the experience and then applying the concept that this is actually beneficial. Like another quick exercise I'll share, and then I'll wrap up this statement and answer, is getting a journal, writing positive on one side, writing negative on the other side, drawing a line down the middle, and writing all the positives to the experience, all the negatives to the experience. And I'm not talking like 5. I'm talking like 10, 20, 50, fire and wire those neurons so you actually can set up a whole neural network that supports automatically seeing balanced experiences. But it's also very humbling because you might write 20 negatives to the experience, really easy, and then you're going to struggle. You might write 5 positives and you'll be like, that's it. Impossible. There has to be an equal amount. You can't have 5 positives to 20 negatives. You're just not looking hard enough, or you're just not seeing where the benefits are or how they're showing up. They might be showing up non-physically. So this is where we need to look at the, you know, other aspects of life. But that's a great exercise to balance your perception on all experiences, whether someone just dumped you or someone criticized you, you know, write down the positives and negatives, balance it out. And then we are not bonded to these one-sided, lopsided perceptions. And I think this is equal to what we call brain noise. You know, this internal chatter, this unprocessed stuff, that's all just lopsided, polarized, one-sided illusions, perceptions of reality.
Oh, absolutely. I got to tell you, I was a slow learner. Here you are in your 20s and you've already got that. And I didn't start getting this stuff until after I was 50. But I was very enmeshed into that whole victim, rescuer, abuser triangle. And that's all I knew. And that's all I saw. And through spirituality, I learned to step outside of that. And then I developed compassion for these people who I felt had done me wrong. Because, you know, normally I agree with you. People are very loving, very kind, you know, but we get screwed up. And so I'm really curious to know. So then you got into the mixed martial arts. Did you ever go back and kick his ass, or did you just forget him?
So I didn't, because he ended up in jail. And so I ended up, the last time I seen him, he was doing like community service around my grandparents' house, which is funny. I just happened to be at my grandparents' place, and he rocks up this bus full of inmates to come and mow the grass and paint the fences and do the community work. And there he was, and it was interesting. My bodily reaction, heart rate increased, that tingling energy sensation. I wouldn't call it nervousness. It's just like this tingling energy of maybe preparedness for just getting ready for something. But I still had that bodily reaction when I seen him. So I knew there was still more to actually process physically. I needed to actually shake out the stuff, and we can get into fascia and water and how that tightens up from psychological trauma and everything. But there was a process of, working with the physiology to release the actual stored energy trauma in the body. So I didn't get to kick his ass, but I did get to love him internally. I got to fully accept him. And I think love is magical like that. Like, we can't transform something until we unconditionally love it. No ifs, buts, or maybes. Love him for who he is and what he done, full stop. Don't matter what he done to me. It was all for me. And I'll get into the MMA thing in a sec, but I think this is important to bring up because I've come to the realization that forgiveness, to me, in my opinion, can be an illusion. And I think it can be a great tool for people depending on how they use it. But for myself, I found that it dissolved. Forgiveness almost arose as a symptom of an imbalanced perception for me, where I needed someone, I needed them to forgive me, or I needed to forgive them because they'd done something to me. Again, it was still in that victim mentality. It wasn't like, no, excuse my language, but fuck forgiveness, because like what they've done is just thank you for giving me this experience. Full stop. I don't need no forgiveness. I just need to thank you and have gratitude for you for giving me this experience. So I found that dissolved as a byproduct of implementing this this law of neutrality, or law of equilibrium, and recognizing that everything is balanced. So MMA, one of the greatest things I ever got into. Because one, it allowed me to channel all that energy I had built up. I mean, respect to all my sparring partners and all my training partners, and I'm sure they were angry too. I'm sure they had a lot of emotional stuff built up. And so we would just kind of take it out on each other, whether that was just on the pads or when it came to physical sparring. I can tell you it wasn't really sparring. Like, I didn't fight professionally because I have perforated eardrums and I have holes in my eardrums. So like getting kicked in the head, getting hit in the ear, I've already got hearing loss. I've already lost a lot of hearing because as I was growing up, I just had constant earaches and bursting eardrums. And so, didn't really want to go deaf. And, I got to a point where I didn't want to get punched in the face anymore at the same time, because I realized MMA was a pseudo purpose. And I can talk about how I came to that recognition as well. So yeah, one, it was a great outlet for channeling all that volcanic energy I had up. Two, it forced me to, if I really wanted to commit myself to this, the question arises, how do I become the best possible athlete? How do I be the best fighter in the world? Like, I was always someone who, I dreamed big internally. Like, I might not have exemplified that externally, but I was always internally like, if I'm going to do something, I'm going to be the best at it. Like, how do I just be the greatest at MMA? So that took me down a whole rabbit hole, as you mentioned in the bio, into understanding the shadow and the unconscious, which is probably something a lot of people leave out because they don't, they're unconscious of their unconscious.
They just want to live in the light and love all the time, and they're missing huge, vast amounts of data that we need in order to to progress. Anyway, sorry, continue.
No, that's
Oh,
a great point, and it's exactly where I was heading to make a point about the shadow. Is that in basic terms, not to go on a rabbit hole into the shadow, but in basic terms, the shadow is where an infinite amount of consciousness lies. I mean, we could power cities on our shadow if we could find a way to plug a human being into some sources. We could run a whole planet on our unconscious. I mean, there's that much consciousness or energy or data, information wrapped up in our consciousness. And when we do these shadow work, when we bring these things into consciousness, into awareness, we liberate this energy, and this allows us to continue to transcend and include. Otherwise, this is why we get stuck. And this is why many people get stuck, is because they transcend. They might transcend the ego. They might get beyond the ego, but they don't integrate the ego, and they don't integrate the other side of the ego, which is the shadow, its psychic twin. So doing that was massive. And I feel like my whole life was kind of accumulating shadow material, because it was kind of dark, and a lot of this like aggressive, selfish traits and qualities that were so heavily dominant, a dominant theme in my life. So shadow, understanding mind, cognition on physical, non-physical level, getting into circadian rhythms, mitochondria, understanding true hydration, H3O2, structured water, minerals, getting deep into nutrition, growing my food at home, experimenting with medicinal mushrooms and nootropics, and obviously the float tanks and the saunas and the cold plunges and red light therapy. And I just got into it all. And that ultimately, again, shifted my level of consciousness, because health, I imagine health to be like, it like enhances the clarity and the quality of our consciousness. So we can use the shadow to liberate consciousness, but it still might be fuzzy. If it's like if you're listening to a song on the radio, there's a lot of static in the way when you're unhealthy, and you're just eating processed food, you're breathing through your mouth, you're constantly wearing shoes and never grounding on the earth, you're etc. The whole deal. It's very fuzzy, and you can't connect to your intuition. You can't hear, you can't really get in touch with the multidimensionality of who you truly are. But when I attended to my health, which is like the soil to a plant, it directly is plugged into and dependent upon the soil, as we are directly plugged in and dependent upon health. Once I cleared that up, I was able to begin to tap into my intuition. I was like, oh, these messages are coming through, all these directions to move are coming through, and what to get into, what to read, where to move, all these internal navigation signs that we get. I just couldn't hear them because I was so unhealthy. And so cleared that up and had better mental clarity and the whole thing. And thirdly, interestingly, something that I've done throughout my healing is what I call like applying, you could call them spiritual principles to our life. And again, one of them being entanglement, like quantum entanglement. Like you can't, nothing is separate. It's all enfolded into each other. And so a belief that I had growing up was that my father wasn't really there. He wasn't really in my life, which he wasn't really. Like I see my dad every 2 weeks on the weekends. And he was just there, but in the most beautiful way. I love my dad, but he was just kind of there. Like he wasn't really, I didn't really open up to him much. We didn't have deep conversations. We didn't fight. Like I just kind of would go and see him, and then I would come home, and that was it. So I had this belief that I didn't really have a father figure in my life. What I realized is, and when we get into spiritual principles, we have to leave so much of the purely physical perceptions behind. But I realized that the gym and all the coaches and people in the gym actually played that father figure role for me. So the literal gym and location itself was like my father figure. When I would go there, I would, have this very masculine energy that would not only support me and like hold me after a deep train, but they would push me to the limits. They would just really play that father figure role. So that was another thing. Once I realized, like, wow, nothing is missing. Like nothing is missing at all in our life.
It's all here. All of it.
It's just in a form we haven't come to recognize yet.
Yeah.
And again, like people will think a father figure, well, I need an actual physical human man that looks a certain way to be in my life to replace the father figure. But no, it actually showed up because it's energy and everything is energy. Why would energy limit itself to one being? Why wouldn't it be a gym and multiple people and coaches?
Right.
So I found that everything is actually here in my life. It's just in an energy that I haven't come to recognize yet. It's there. I'm just misinterpreting it and not seeing it for the energy that it's in.
Yeah, I hear you. I just want to give you a brief experience that I had that's different but the same. And my brother Dan, he spent his whole life, studying natural plants and their medicinal wild weeds and things, and what their medicinal content and nutritional content. And he was always foraging and snacking on basically weeds. So one day he and I, we were out for a walk and we sat down in this lot, and I said, oh, we got to go. I'm starving. And he said, open your eyes, he said. And he started leaping like a little gnome from this plant to that plant to just all these different kinds of weeds. He says, this has 500 times the vitamin C of an orange. This has and intense nutrition. And everybody's spraying Roundup and killing all these amazing, beautiful medicinal plants. So our cures for our ills are growing all around us. You see people lined up at the food bank for crappy cans of soup and mac and cheese, and nobody knows.
There's a dandelion growing out of the crack in front of the food bank right there that's more nutritious than anything they've probably ever eaten.
Yeah. So I thought it was sort of similar but different. And I think food's so important, but it's really funny. People go, oh, Karen, help me. I want to experience some of what you experience. I want to raise my level of spirituality. I say, well, what are you eating? Right. And then as soon as they realize they have to change how they eat, that, McDonald's is not going to support a spiritual experience. They're not interested anymore. So anyway, sorry, I don't want to take this off on a tangent, but I just think it's so wonderful. Do you want us to spend a minute talking about how important food is?
Oh, yeah. Well, let me start with health overall, because I think it's good for people to have a definition, right? Because a lot of people talk about health, but I'm wired in a way where I'm such a fundamental, foundational person that when I have conversations, and even on my podcast, I'm like, what does that word mean? Like, what do you mean? How do you define that? Like, what's the foundation to that? So I do spontaneously just like to lay down my own definitions, because I think it's important. So I think health, there's two perspectives that I'll share. And it comes from this amazing book, Health as Expanding Consciousness, by, it's right there, Margaret A. Newman. I highly recommend people read this. It was written in the early 1990s, but it is just a gem and will shift your perspective massively on health. So one definition that she shares in that book is that disease plus non-disease equals health. So health is a continuum from illness to wellness. So it's this fluid movement in which illness is something that's purposeful, that gives us an opportunity to reorganize our pattern and move on to find a new higher level of organization, of order, of consciousness. So health is whole. It's even in the word, H-E-A-L, heal, W-H-O-L, whole, holy. It's like, you could call it health. It's just about enhancing the quality of your integrity overall. Now, I did look up mainstream medicine's definition, because and they changed it, funny enough. Previously, it used to simply be the absence of disease. Now it's a state of complete physical, mental, and social well-being, and not merely the absence of disease. I love how they had to make sure they said not merely the absence of disease, but they've also completely left out spirit. It's a state of complete physical, mental, and social well-being. That's like modern medicine's definition of health. Bland, it's like, it's McDonald's as a definition, It's very boring. So the second definition of health that I kind of mentioned is that health is to a human being what soil is to a plant. And just as the plant is plugged in and directly dependent upon and builds its whole life upon the quality of the health, the exact same goes for our health, I believe. I believe we build our whole life upon the quality and foundation of our health. It's like the concrete slab. It's like that soil that you use to build a beautiful, thriving, healthy garden or a very strong, big, beautiful house. If you don't have the right elements in the soil, if you don't have a nice, even, balanced concrete slab, whatever you build on top of the soil or the slab is just going to be susceptible to stress. It's going to, in terms of the plant, it's going to go brown, it's going to brittle up, it's going to dehydrate, and it's not going to live up to its full potential. So also on top of that, health is what gives us the capacity to even express our fullest potential. Like if you are not healthy, you've just like constricted your potential now. So now food, nutrition. I love nutrition. I could talk about nutrition for hours. I have my own system around nutrition and how to engage it and some of my own principles in that. But food is not just physical matter. Like food is information. On an esoteric level, food is alive, it's conscious, it has a personality. I combined 2 books plus my own philosophy. It was from food energetics and vibrational nutrition. And I came to create a whole picture of like what a food personality may look like. So like you got to look at the direction it grows. That will tell you one thing, the color it expresses, the taste and the flavors is another thing, the shape and the geometry of the food. You know, these are all characteristics or qualities that we are energetically intertwining into our being. So you can leverage states of consciousness by eating specific foods. You want to be more energetic, you want to be more focused, you want to relax, you want to detox, you want to XYZ. We have food as a medicine cabinet, as tools to bring into our body to leverage different states, to shift our perspective. Like food will literally contribute to the way you view the world, depending on what you eat. So when you really get like a deep picture of what food is, you begin to engage with it differently. Like when I'm going to the farmer's market, I'm looking at colors. Like what color do I feel like I'm missing in my life right now? Or what stands out to me? You know, what significantly moves me? What about the geometry? Like on an energetic level, not logically, I'm just going in to feel what the food is communicating to me. And I'm definitely not going to Macca's. I'm definitely not going to Hungry Jack's. That food doesn't even have any energy. It doesn't have any life force. If anything, it has like, what's the word? Maybe distorted information. And when you eat distorted information, you are going to be intertwining distorted information into you. And then again, that like plays into the layers that create our filter that we see the world through. So that's just a little bit about why food is so important. Yeah.
And also recognizing what is a food-like substance, because for me, I one of my biggest addictions was refined carbohydrates and sugars and even artificial sweeteners, which in some ways are even worse. Yes. Wow, it took me years of constantly falling off the wagon and getting back on. Years. Yep. Now, I don't remember. Well, that's not true. But once a year, I might go out to a restaurant, you know, for a social thing. But besides that, no, I don't eat any processed foods at all. And but it took me years. I weighed over 320 pounds most of my adult life until I had my spiritual awakening. And absolutely, food does fuel spiritual. I don't even know what the word is. I was going to say spirituality, but it's much bigger than that. Some amazing experiences. Like when I do a lot of blue-green algae, like spirulina and chlorella, wow, for some reason that really links me up. So I just wondered if you want to, because I'm good for you for getting over your sugar addiction. That is tough. If you can get over a sugar addiction, you can pretty well get over everything.
Yeah. It's a pretty hard challenge. Now, I just want to make a point on this, because as I've come to learn, and it's probably not a sugar addiction, and I don't think sugar is as bad as it's been demonized. Mm-hmm. And now when we talk about sugar, we're talking about carbohydrates, fructose, sucrose, glucose. Like, it's found in fruits, found in plants, and small amounts in animal meats and different parts of animals.
But the really refined stuff, like the
yes.
corn glucose and all that stuff, that there's no way that would be in our natural environment. It has to be scientifically altered in the lab, right?
Yeah. Agreed. Absolutely agreed. I think there probably is a caveat to some refined sugars, though, in that the worst part, not only is it refined, it's probably genetically modified, and it's got pesticide, herbicide, fungicide residues. Like, that's a big part of it. But just in and of refined sugar itself, I don't think it might be as bad as we've been led to believe. I think it's when it's in combination with PUFAs, or polyunsaturated fatty acids, which is the corn oils, the seed oils, the canola, vegetable, rapeseed, whatever it is, sunflower oil. Those are really the culprit for things like diabetes and insulin resistance. I don't think it's sugar. I think it's a combination of cortisol and polyunsaturated fats that actually lead to insulin resistance. I've been doing an experiment as of late. I have a bag of organic raw white sugar. I've been eating like 4 tablespoons of that a day, and I feel fantastic, because I think a lot of it was my programming. We've been led to believe it's a stimulant. Sugar is not a stimulant. It's actually a relaxant. It will relax the nervous system. It will calm you down. A teaspoon of sugar before bed can be amazing, really amazing, because it actually de-excites the nervous system. Raw organic sugar brings with it what creates more carbon dioxide in the body. Carbon dioxide is not a waste gas. It's a highly crucial nutrient that we absolutely need. And when we have higher levels of carbon dioxide in the body, we're actually more oxygenated, since it's carbon dioxide that actually allows the release of oxygen from hemoglobin to get into the cells. So it's literally the key. It almost acts like it's a signaling molecule. It's like insulin, and like insulin will carry the sugars to the cell, and insulin needs to be there, for sugar to get into the cells. Carbon dioxide needs to be present in the body for oxygen to make that exchange to go into the cells. When we have low levels of carbon dioxide, we retain oxygen within hemoglobin, and we begin to suffocate and oxidize and everything else that happens. But sugar is the only thing that creates a bunch of extra carbon dioxide molecules in the body, which is absolutely beneficial. There's also a guy, William Budd, I think it was maybe late 1800s, early 1900s, was curing diabetes with sugar, known as fructose therapy. He was giving people like 12 tablespoons of sugar a day who had diabetes and insulin resistance and other symptoms and what we call diseases and illnesses, which is like a whole another paradigm shift that I think we need to make. But yeah, I'm kind of just rambling and giving you my 2 cents on sugar, because it's something that I've completely done a 180 degree on. You asked about my sugar addiction, that's right. And I was making the point that, sugar isn't even as bad as I've been demonizing it. I mean, I want to go back on my health and wellness and shit podcast and like clear some things up, because I was also playing that game. I was running that program, and I don't think sugar is as bad as it's deemed, and that we would benefit being on not a low carbohydrate diet, like this carnivore keto movement. I think we're going to see over the next few years them start to develop certain symptoms and illness. One, because it's too one-sided and absolute. There's no variety. Like, why would Mother Nature just create, like, most people think there's like probably 1,000 foods. Like, no, there's hundreds and thousands of edible food from plants to fungi to algae to animals, like it all that's edible on this. So I think sugar can be really, really beneficial when eaten at the right time and with the right things and done appropriately.
It's when it's in
I think it was really just
it
was a processed food addiction. So it wasn't just a sugar addiction, it was
Yeah.
polyunsaturated fatty acid addiction, unsaturated fat addiction, the salt, fat, and sugar combination. So again, we can't just blame sugar. It's a combination of I'm sure even like the natural flavors, which are based on petrochemicals. Like I'm sure you know that the pharmaceutical industry was birthed from the oil industry, and how we got, pharmaceuticals was from John D. Rockefeller realizing that petrochemicals can be patented, turned into pharmaceuticals. But at the time, interestingly, everybody was still using holistic and natural methods. So he had no clients, no customers. So what did they do? Well, they're great at problem, reaction, solution. I think they did two things, and I don't know exactly because I need to do more research on this, but I'm suspecting they either did a COVID-like germ theory indoctrination, putting that out there, that there's some foreign invader on the outside that's coming to attack you, and you guys need our pharmaceuticals, you need our vaccine, you need our surgeries, or whatever the means is. And then secondly, they brought forth this whole paradigm in that the body is broken, and that symptoms, illness, and disease, and that, all the infinitude of healing responses that the body has, we're going to label as symptoms, illness, and disease. So we can brainwash the people to think that these intelligently coordinated responses by the body are actually external things attacking you, or that you're broken and that you need to come and buy our drugs and see our doctors. And then you build a whole school and a whole system around that, and then you brainwash people to continue spreading this information that we're all broken and that we're just biological beings that are, succumbing to our environment and being attacked by invaders. And I mean, you can even hear the military terminology from Western medicine. We have invaders coming from the outside to attack us. We need to build up our immune defenses so we can seek and destroy, because it's the constant war on cancer, the constant war on heart disease, the constant war on Alzheimer's. I mean, the paradigm in and of itself is so distorted.
It really, really is. And when you go to the doctor, they'll give you something to reduce the symptom. Well, to me, that makes no sense, because the symptom is the body telling me that there's another problem. And if I keep covering up symptoms, not to mention that the pharmaceuticals, if you take 2, you have a whole bunch of interactions. If you take 3, you have even more interactions. Then you don't know. So pretty soon you're going to the doctor looking for help for symptoms that are actually caused by the medications you're already on. And people my age, I'm 66 years old, I'm an old lady, and I don't hang out with old people because they all got their bags of pills. Well, there's a few healthy ones, but bags of pills, and they're all, and I don't remember what this one's for, but this one is for this, and this one. And it's almost like a status or a prestige thing, whoever's on the most drugs and pills. But I don't do any of that stuff. I quit it all. And
the body has no,
unless actually, I don't go see the doctor at all anymore because I don't trust them, because I know that they're a bunch of, pardon my language, fucking idiots, as has been exposed by this whole jab situation. I would not trust my health to them. I'm sorry, but that's how I feel.
They're street pharmacists. I mean, they're just like, they're your local drug dealer. Really, they don't know nothing. Like, the amount of times that my mom's told me she's gone to her local GP. I don't know why, when you have a holistic health coach as a son. And even he says, you probably want to talk to Lachlan about this. Like, I've seen him a few times. I walk in, he's drinking a can of Coke. I'm like, okay, if you can't even, and he's overweight, you can't even look after your own health. Who are you to be looking after others? It's like a fat nutritionist trying to give me advice. It's like, what are we doing? And no human body is deficient in pharmaceutical drugs. None. We do not have receptors. Like, we have an endocannabinoid system. And we
Yeah,
have
we do.
receptors for like LSD and receptors for ayahuasca and all these natural medicine. We have zero receptors or anything set up internally for pharmaceutical drugs. You know, it's like
so
when you
true.
look out in nature, do you see any trees growing like pills? You see any trees fruiting bottles of Xanax or something? No. It's like a tree, you know, like nature's gonna, yeah, it's really such a, and people are so indoctrinated into that once they're on the medication, they think they can't let it go because it's all that helps them operate daily. Like they need their pills just to function. And I see this with my grandmother firsthand. She's like one of my favorite people, and I just got to watch her like eat cereal bowls full of medications for breakfast and then just complain that nothing's working out and keep going to the doctor. And like it's like Groundhog Day, just every day the kind of same thing, and but it's just declining and getting worse and degenerating. And it's kind of sad because the tools are there. We have access to everything to completely shift our health. But you know, some people just, that's their journey. They're either too heavily indoctrinated or literally that's just that what their lesson is to learn this lifetime.
Yep, that's the thing. You know, I have my opinions, but I have to, like, for instance, I have grown children. I have to respect their choices of their journey. And I tell them the best I can. If they don't want to hear it or they're ignoring it, that's their right to do so. And I got to love them anyway. Love them just the way they are and give them that space to make mistakes and to learn. I don't really want them to go through what I went through, but at the same time, you know, that might be their choice and I have to respect them as being intelligent people. And I don't know what else to say about that. Lachlan, we've got about 10 minutes left. Do you want to talk a little bit about psychedelics? Do you want to talk a little, because they've been so heavily demonized, even cannabis. I don't know how it is in Australia, but even here in Canada, even though it's legal, it's still considered something filthy and drug addicts and all this other jazz. Do you want to speak to psychedelics a little bit? I would class cannabis in with them, even though at least for me, I don't get the visual stuff from it.
I guess we could define psychedelic as just like a psychoactive substance found in nature. You know, that could be like kava. They drink in Fiji, I think it is, you know, anything like that. That's plant, toad, animal. It's, you know, has psychoactive qualities. Yeah.
Find me a toad and lick it.
Smoking toad venom, you know. Came up with that stuff. It's always interesting to like just how they discovered like mixing, like even with ayahuasca, like mixing it specifically with a specific vine. Like y'all had some instructions either intuitively or from someone that was like holding your hand and was like, you take this one, mix them together, and you're gonna meet grandmother ayahuasca. But yeah, so they obviously have had a bad rap due to like, you know, the powers that be not wanting us to access them, probably because they have amazing abilities to open us up to our psyche, to dig into the dusty old nooks and cranny of our psyche that we neglect reaching to and may not be able to get to in a sober state, but they allow us to really get there with assistance too. And I guess we're also talking about like not just a psychoactive substance, we're talking about an entity. I've heard people describe psychedelics as, what was the word? Basically, I can't remember the exact term, but it's like a spiritual master who's reincarnated back as, you know, a plant or as this intelligence that's manifesting itself at a vibratory level as a plant. So we're really talking about entities and intelligences, not just like a vine and a plant, as I've stated. So they're so multi-dimensional just in and of their job. But yeah, I mean, it's just like the conversation we kind of had around food. You know, it's not like we only need to have this conversation really because it's been so heavily demonized, because people have blown it out of proportion and made up a whole bunch of stuff about them. I guarantee, a lot of the powers that be probably haven't tried them, or maybe I know the CIA experimented with LSD and other things, of course, like MK Ultra and everything, but they definitely know the potential of them. But I think they're almost bringing themselves to the surface, because they're intelligent, because they're entities. It's like they know that, like, y'all need some help, y'all need some assistance, y'all need a little bit of a rocket boost through this time. And I've felt like they're bringing themselves into our awareness, just like crystals and stone medicine. I have a good friend who's deep into that, and she describes it the same way. Interestingly, though, the stone of the earth, whereas the plants are on the surface. So working with stones as well is something that I think we can see come to the surface as well. But yeah, I think if you are feeling called to like try them, or even just thinking about them, I encourage people to always do research first, like get to know what it's like hear people's reviews, hear people's stories. If you want to research the chemical side of it, like what's happening neurologically, for me, I found that to be like understanding things before you go into them just helps so much with the experience. And then making sure you're healthy. Now, it's kind of a bilateral thing where you want to be healthy, of course, before going into a psychedelic journey. You want to be clear, and you want to be prepared physiologically for what's going to take place. But psychedelics can also be that catalyst that takes someone who's like 300 pounds and just deep into it and give them that realization that, they're not really happy with where they're at, and they should make the change. And this is what it looks like. And it really gives them that deep-seated inspiration. So it can kind of work both ways with that. But if you are hearing this and you're thinking about it, definitely take some steps to like be hydrated, of course, and mineralized, because psychedelics, especially if you're purging, you're vomiting, maybe you get diarrhea, maybe you're sweating, even you'll probably be breathing heavier, so you'll be losing a lot more CO2 and oxygen, and probably off-gassing a whole bunch of toxins. So you want to make sure that you're hydrated, well mineralized, and just, nutritionally sound overall. And yeah, there's some other health, like getting good sleep as well. We don't want to go into it too tired. Obviously, then you have the setting, what's your intention with going into this? What's the goal? What do you want? The setting, making sure you're doing it in a good environment. You don't want to be doing them, around too many people, especially people that you don't trust. I mean, depending on the state that you're in, they definitely do therapies now. There are places. I've interviewed Daniel McQueen, who has a whole facility of guided cannabis and like other heavier psychedelics, therapy sessions. But I found that if you tapped in enough, your soul will be your therapist. It'll guide you. It'll be the therapist for you. And so setting, I would say, and again, it's so dependent on the psychedelic, because if you're doing mushrooms, like you might want to see the trees, you might want to be outside laying in the sun and looking at the rocks and the soil and everything. Whereas you might want to stay inside, put an eye mask on, sit with some music and a journal. Like that's two completely different settings, but both equally as therapeutic and important. But then, of course, you got integration afterwards, which is so important and what many people don't do. I imagine a psychedelic experience, to sum it up, be like the shattering of a pitcher of a glass. And then you have the opportunity to now reintegrate it in a whole new way. Yes. You get to put it back together in a completely brand new way. But it was a psychedelic that helped you deconstruct everything. But people, that's all they do, is they go through this catabolism, this deconstruction, and then they go back into another ceremony a week later, and they keep going and they keep going.
Yeah,
they just have all of this unprocessed material that needs to be integrated. So integrate post-trip integration, most important.
Lachlan, we're almost out of time. I'm wondering if you want to just quickly spend a couple minutes talking about what you offer, where people can find you. And of course, the links will be in the description below.
Yeah, no, it's been an honor to connect with you, Karen. Thanks for having me on. People, if you would like to connect with me, you can find my podcast, Transcendent Explorations and Spiritual Explorations, via Buzzsprout, YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify. You can find it all on there. I do two services. I provide two services. One, holistic health coaching. So I primarily help people with breathing and sleep. So asthma, sleep apnea, even just fatigue, poor sleep, that's the foundation in which I start. And a lot of people who I see have asthma, breathing problems. Like, it's so common that, we don't realize that we are chronically hyperventilating and overbreathing as a nation. So that's one thing that I offer. And the second thing is I help conscious entrepreneurs or wellness professionals or anyone in general create their own podcasts. So I either hold your hand through the whole thing. We go from no podcast to you getting up podcasts out in the world and you're interviewing people and you're doing the whole thing. Or we kind of do it for you. So we'll help you create the podcast, but then all you do is you show up. We'll do the editing. We'll do the distribution. You just show up, do your magic, and we'll get the podcast out there. So if you're interested in that, just message me on Instagram and let me know. But yeah, that's it from me.
Okay, well, thank you so much for being on the show, Lachlan. I can't wait to have you back because there's so much information that we didn't even touch on today. And I want to thank all the viewers for joining us for the Quantum Guide Show, and we'll see you next week. Bye-bye.
Thank you for joining us for the Quantum Guide Show. Become the change you wish to see in the world. Subscribe to Karen's YouTube channel, click the like button, and share this show with your friends. Check out Karen's website at KarenHoltonHealthCoach.com. All the links are available in the description box below. Until the next time, keep up the good work.
Surrendering to endlessness puts all my inner strife to rest. For time gives birth to hurriedness. It all makes sense, well, more or less. And the sages put me to their test. With heart and soul to do my best to find the answers to my quest. I wonder and I must confess, I don't know where